Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, today we're going to be looking at medical tourism.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's pretty fascinating, right? And we've got some research and articles here that we're going to be pulling from to try to understand this whole complex industry.
Yeah.
Is it really a win-win for everyone involved? That's what we're going to be looking at today.
Well, what's really interesting to me is why people actually travel for medical care in the first place.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah,
it's not just about like luxury or even, finding a cheaper option.
right,
Sometimes people travel because they're looking for some sort of cutting edge treatment,
right.
something that's not even available where they live.
Yeah, like imagine you need like a super specialized surgery.
Hmm.
And there's this hospital overseas that's like the best in the world for that.
Right.
It's got to feel like
Absolutely.
almost like a beacon of hope in a way.
It is a beacon of hope, but it's also tied to money. One of the sources we were looking at said it pretty bluntly, money enables tourism. Without money, there would be no tourism.
Yeah. Wow.
And so medical tourism really caters most of the time to a wealthier demographic.
Okay, so it's not as simple as just wanting to travel for care. You have to
Yeah.
be able to afford it.
Right.
So how does this all tie into healthcare inequality then?
Well, when medical tourists, who are often from wealthier nations, go to another country for treatment, it can kind of create like a two-tiered system.
Mm-hmm.
The resources, the really talented professionals, the attention,
Yeah.
even can get diverted towards those who can pay.
Right, right.
And they can leave the locals, with fewer options and longer wait times.
So it's not just that individuals are seeking better care, it's that the structure of medical tourism itself can actually make those inequalities worse.
Yeah. And Amit Sengupta, who's a public health expert that we were reading about, he points this out.
Okay.
He says that public health systems in the countries that are the destinations for medical tourism,
Mm-hmm.
they might actually prioritize these wealthy foreign patients
Wow.
at the expense of their own citizens.
That's a lot to unpack. I mean, you've got individuals making choices, you've got economics, and then you've got the government's responsibility to take care of their people.
It's true.
It's complex. Is
Uh,
there like a specific example that shows how this all plays out?
Yeah. They talk about New Zealanders who go to India for certain surgeries.
Okay.
And on the surface, it seems like everyone wins.
Right. Patients get what they need. India makes some money.
Right. But it's not that simple.
It never is it?
No, it's not. I mean, this type of medical tourism can actually make inequality in India worse
Oh, wow.
because the elite, both local and foreign, they have access to these high quality services, but there's so many people in India who struggle just to get basic health care.
So even if nobody's trying to do anything bad,
Right.
just the act of going there can have negative consequences?
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about the potential dangers yet.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, going to another country for treatment has to come with some risks.
It does. One of the biggest is what happens if you have complications after you come home.
Oh, right.
What if you need follow-up care, but you don't have all your medical records?
Oh, yeah.
Or you can't really explain to your doctor what happened overseas?
That sounds like a nightmare.
It can be. And it's not just hypothetical. There was a study in the British Medical Journal, and they looked at Canadian medical tourists.
Oh, okay.
A lot of them came home without complete medical records.
Really?
Yeah, so their doctors back home had trouble giving them the right care.
So it's not just about the procedure itself, it's about all the care around it before and after.
Exactly. And that's where the lack of a really solid international system is a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, without clear rules about sharing information and patient safety and who's accountable, the risks just get bigger.
Okay. Wow, this is heavy stuff. But
It is.
before we get too lost in the scary side of things, can we talk about the money part of it?
Sure.
This is a huge industry, right? But how does it affect, everyone else?
Well, the healthcare manager, one of the sources we looked at, estimated that the industry's worth between like $45.5 billion and $72 billion
Ooh.
globally. So, that kind of money moving around has to have some impact.
Right. So how does that translate to like real world effects for people who aren't doing the medical tourism thing?
Think about insurance premiums.
Yeah.
When more people go abroad for procedures, insurance companies see more claims from those procedures.
Ah.
And that can lead to higher costs for everyone.
So even if I'm sitting here, not going anywhere for treatment, my insurance could still go up because of medical tourism.
That's the potential downside.
Hmm.
And the article mentions that some big insurance companies like Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, They're already adjusting their premiums because of this trend.
Wow. So it's making insurance less affordable for people who aren't even part of the whole medical tourism thing?
Right, especially for people who are already struggling with healthcare costs.
Wow. We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Ethical concerns,
Yeah.
risks to patients, now money problems.
There's a lot.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I want to touch on, the whole culture and language barrier.
Yeah.
I mean, navigating a foreign healthcare system has got to be tough.
It can be language differences, different cultural norms, different expectations about healthcare can all be really challenging.
So how do you even make sure you're making a good decision if you're thinking about medical tourism?
Heidi Casper, she's a researcher who focuses on medical tourism. She says you got to do your homework. Don't just go for the cheapest thing. Look at the doctors, the hospitals, and the risks.
Right, because shiny brochures don't always tell the whole story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she says, try to learn about the culture of healthcare of the country you're going to.
Okay.
Like, how do they communicate? What's the patient's role in making decisions? Things like that.
So you got to be a smart consumer, but also like a culturally aware one.
Right.
That makes you think, how much does understanding the culture affect how much you trust your doctor?
That's a great question.
Would you feel more or less comfortable with a doctor from a totally different background? Something to think about as we go forward.
Definitely brings in the human element.
Yeah, this has been a whirlwind look at medical tourism. We've gone way beyond the brochures and found some tough stuff.
For sure.
But before we get too down, I want to explore some possible solutions. Is there a way to think about global healthcare so that it's fair and everyone can get what they need?
That's a great question, and that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive, so stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
It's a tough question, but I do think it's so important to find ways to make global healthcare better.
Yeah.
Like, instead of everyone traveling for care, what if we were better at sharing knowledge and resources across borders?
So more collaboration instead of everyone just doing their own thing.
Yeah, like a global healthcare network.
Wow.
Where everyone's sharing best practices and learning from each other. That could really raise the standard of care in places that are struggling.
That sounds amazing, but how do you even start to do something that big?
It would take a huge change in how we think about healthcare.
Yeah.
Governments, organizations, doctors, even insurance companies would all need to work together.
That's a lot to ask.
It is, but it's exciting to think about.
It's like a total shift in how we see healthcare globally.
And who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe all this talk about the problems with medical tourism can push us in that direction.
Maybe instead of seeing it as a bad thing, we can see it as a chance to build something better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, let's use this energy to find solutions that help everyone.
Okay, but let's be real for a minute.
Okay.
Even if we could magically create this perfect system, wouldn't there still be people who want to do medical tourism?
Probably.
Like, what about those super specialized procedures? Or if you just want a second opinion?
You're right. There will probably always be some medical tourism.
Okay.
But we can try to make it more ethical. Like, what if some of the money from medical tourism went back into the local healthcare system?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, could fund better facilities or train local doctors or even help people who can't afford care.
So medical tourism could actually help the places where it's happening.
Exactly. Instead of just taking resources, it could give back.
I like that. And what about technology? I feel like that has to play a role too.
Absolutely. Telemedicine has so much potential.
Oh, yeah. You could have virtual appointments, or doctors could monitor patients remotely.
Even robotic surgery done by experts far away.
It's mind-blowing.
Technology opens up all these new ways to make healthcare more fair.
It might not replace medical tourism entirely,
Right.
but it could make it less necessary.
For sure.
This is pretty amazing. We started by looking at the dark side of medical tourism, and now we're talking about a future where healthcare is better for everyone.
It's a long road, but at least we're asking the right questions.
Yeah, and sometimes asking the right questions is the first step to finding the right answers.
I agree.
Well, on that note, we're going to turn things over to you, our listeners.
Oh, great.
We got some really interesting questions during our last segment, and we're excited to share our thoughts, so stick with us. And we are back for the third part of our deep dive on medical tourism. We've talked about the good, the bad, and now it's time to hear from you, our listeners. We got some really great questions, so let's jump in.
Yeah, sounds good.
One listener asks, if medical tourism is so messed up, should it just be banned?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
It shows just how serious these issues are. But banning it might not be the answer.
Yeah, why not?
Well, people are always going to want the best healthcare they can get right.
That makes sense.
If you ban it, they'll probably find ways to do it anyway, but it'll be underground and even riskier.
So instead of banning it, maybe we need to make it safer and fix the problems that make people want to do it in the first place.
Exactly.
Hmm.
We need stronger rules internationally about patient safety, sharing information, and follow-up care.
Ah.
And we can't forget about the countries that are losing their doctors and nurses to medical tourism.
Yeah, we got to support those healthcare systems.
Hmm.
Here's another question. What can we do as individuals to be more ethical about medical tourism?
I think the most important thing is to be informed. Do your research. Don't just go for the cheapest option.
Yeah.
Look at the doctors, the hospitals, the risks, and be really honest with yourself about why you're going abroad.
Right. Think about the bigger picture. Are you supporting a system that benefits the rich at the expense of everyone else?
Exactly. And don't forget about the practical stuff, too.
Like what?
Are you ready to deal with language barriers, cultural differences, and maybe even complications when you're far from home?
It's a lot to consider. This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes. We've gone way beyond the surface of medical tourism and learned about all the ethical and practical challenges,
It's been quite a journey.
but we've also started talking about how to make healthcare better for everyone around the world.
And that's what matters most. We need to keep asking these tough questions and pushing for real change.
I couldn't agree more. The goal should be a world where everyone can get the healthcare they need no matter where they live or how much money they have.
Absolutely. Healthcare should be a right, not a privilege.
Well said. That's it for our deep dive into medical tourism. We hope you learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to help create a more just and equitable healthcare system for all.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And that's a wrap.